The four-mind hacks used by Germany in the Second World War. What Andrew Carnegie understood about them. At the beginning of the 20th century, Andrew Carnegie was already one of the most influential men on the planet. He had built the largest steel empire in the world. Then he sold everything. And he spent the rest of his life trying to prevent one thing: war. Carnegie believed that wars are not born from weapons alone. They are born in the human mind. That is why he financed international courts, treaties, and the Peace Palace. He said the real battlefield was psychological. And when the Second World War began years after his death, the world witnessed something Carnegie had foreseen: an entire nation being driven by invisible mental techniques. Germany did not build only armies. It built mental states. And behind that were four psychological hacks. For principles Carnegie had already observed in leaders, industries, and crowds long before the bombs fell. Hack 1. Identity before reason. Carnegie said people do not die for arguments. They die for identity. In Germany during the 1930s, the regime created a powerful story. Who you are, who we are, who they are. Everything was designed to fuse individuals into a single collective identity. What you think no longer mattered. What you belong to did. When someone merges with an identity, they stop questioning. They start defending. Carnegie had seen this in business. Companies that built strong identities earned loyalty. They did not need explanations. Hack 2. Repetition creates truth. The German regime understood something Carnegie taught his partners. The human mind confuses repetition with reality. If you hear something often enough, the brain stops questioning it. That is why slogans, symbols, speeches, and images were repeated constantly. The goal was not to persuade. It was to wear down critical thinking. Carnegie called this mental conditioning. Whoever controls what you hear every day controls what you believe. Hack 3. Directed fear. Carnegie said fear is a form of energy, and every form of energy needs a target. In Germany, fear was carefully aimed at specific enemies, not abstract fear. Fear with a face. When fear has a target, people unite against something external. That creates unity, but it also creates blindness. Carnegie had seen this in economic crises. Whoever controls fear controls behavior. Hack 4. Automatic obedience. Carnegie believed a person's greatest wealth was the ability to think independently. Germany removed that. People were trained to obey first and think later. Rules. Uniforms. Hierarchy. Everything was designed to turn people into extensions of a system. When obedience becomes automatic, conscience goes silent. Carnegie said systems thrive when individuals stop questioning. And that is exactly what happened. But Carnegie did not study these hacks to use them. He studied them to neutralize them. In business, he did the opposite. He built identity around value. He repeated ideas of progress. He aimed fear at waste. And he encouraged independent thinking. That is how he built his empire. And that is why he spent the rest of his life trying to prevent wars. He knew that when these four hacks align, any nation can be driven into disaster. Blind identity, endless repetition, directed fear, automatic obedience. Germany used these principles to move millions. Carnegie studied them to free individuals. That is the difference. The same mental mechanisms can build empires or destroy the world. It all depends on who controls them. Once those four hacks were embedded into the collective mind, something irreversible happened. People no longer saw themselves as individuals. They saw themselves as parts of a machine. Carnegie said that when individuality disappears, morality disappears with it. In Germany, this was deliberate. Creating a population that thought as one body made mass control easier. People no longer asked if something was right. They only asked if it was allowed. Carnegie believed this was the point of no return. When obedience replaces conscience, constant messaging shaped perception. Newspapers, radios, posters, everything repeated the same story. The world is dangerous. You are threatened. Only the system can protect you. This created psychological dependence. People trusted the regime more than their own judgment. Carnegie saw this as the collapse of mental autonomy. He always said the most dangerous man is not the tyrant. It is the man who stops thinking. At the same time, directed fear created imaginary enemies. When fear is given a target, people unite. But it also gives justification for violence. The regime understood this. Every crisis was blamed on someone. Every problem was given a face. Carnegie knew this was an ancient technique. In times of scarcity, manipulative leaders always invent enemies to hide their own failure. But the deepest hack was the fourth: automatic obedience. Children were trained early not to question. Adults were conditioned to obey. Uniforms, rituals, and pledges replaced judgment with reflex. Carnegie said that when you remove a person's ability to judge, you remove their humanity. The most frightening part was that these hacks did not look like violence. They looked like organization, discipline, order. But behind it was a system of mental control. Carnegie knew these principles were not unique to Germany. He had seen them in corporations, governments, and religions. The difference was intention. That is why he spent his life defending education, libraries, and critical thinking. Because an educated mind recognizes manipulation. An ignorant mind absorbs it. Carnegie believed books were weapons against tyranny. Every library was a fortress against mental control. Every reader was harder to manipulate. That is why he funded thousands of libraries. Not to make people smarter, but to make them free. When the Second World War ended, the world was stunned. How could an entire nation be taken so far? Carnegie would have said it was not the war that failed. It was mental education. When the four hacks align, any society can be controlled. Blind identity, constant repetition, directed fear, automatic obedience. The true warning from Carnegie was never about Germany. It was about human nature. And that lesson still matters today.